Thank you so much for agreeing to this artist interview. We're going to get started right away, if that's okay. All
Sure.
right. So, first question, we're going back in the time machine to find out, were you always interested in art, like at a young age? And if so, how was that interest supported?
So I think looking back, I was most certainly interested in art. I didn't really start drawing until a little bit later, but I can remember like being 3 or 4 on the couch with my like grandfather watching like The Lion King or The Little Mermaid and just like really enjoying what that looked like. And I think, as I got older and I started to draw, having those people in my life, like my parents and my teachers, they wouldn't necessarily come out and be like, hey, this is really cool, but what they would do, which I'm thinking back now, and it's like really interesting, is they would ask me a lot of questions, which was really cool. So I think through that, it really taught me how to think about what I was actually making as I started to draw more original stuff instead of just being like, hey, that's really cool. I love what you're doing. They would ask me, what is this about? Why are you drawing this? What are you thinking about when you're drawing it? And I think that's kind of what kicked off the spark of, oh, I kind of like what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Excellent. Yes, such great things too. I think that's really how we should be talking to children about their art instead of saying, "Oh, that's so pretty, we like it." Asking those questions that encourage artistic growth and being able to describe your work is really great.
Yeah.
So that is wonderful that you had that support. And when do you think you first started to consider yourself an artist, like using that word?
Sure. I want to say it was probably later in my career, whatever you want to call it. When I grew up, I went to a high school that didn't have any like art curriculum. They didn't have any like electives, so I wasn't really focusing on art in high school. So when it came time to choose my major and get into college, and I started to talk to people who also enjoyed art, I think that's when I started to really think of myself as like an artist. I think one time that really sticks out is when I had my work featured in a gallery for my undergraduate degree. I did a lot of visual audio stuff, and some of it got into a gallery. And being there and having people that I didn't know talking about my art and talking to me about it was a really cool experience. I wasn't used to it, so I think that's one of those times that really sticks out as like me being an artist.
Like it's always really inspiring that first time. That experience just doesn't really get replicated from that first time of being
No,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And being outside of like when you're just making art, a lot of the times you're not really, for most times for me, I'm just not showing people my process and stuff because I'm
Mhm.
just making a bunch of stuff. So when people finally get to see it and they're talking about it, that's a really cool feeling.
Wonderful. We're actually going to ask a little about your process in a little bit. Before we get to that, how would you describe the art that you create?
I think if you would ask me that tomorrow, I would probably give you another, like, I would give you a couple of like other descriptions of words. I make so many different things constantly because my brain is always thinking about how to make things. I don't know if I would explain it in one specific way. I think if I had to boil it all into like a bottle, I think that bottle would probably be labeled like frenetic, all over the place, really controlled chaos. It all works out in the end, but it's just constant brain just going into things and figuring out what I want to do in that moment.
Great. And I know you mentioned that your exhibit that you had in the gallery was like multimedia. So, what would be your media that you tend to gravitate towards now?
Yeah, so growing up, I was really, really into audio production. So that was either making like, traditional music, like pop music or rock music with friends. And then as I got into college, experimenting with like ambient drone music and more conceptual, just audio spaces. And then as I got into digital media and design and digital art, I started to kind of marry those ideas of something on a screen with audio accompanying it. So I think that now I'm really focusing on marrying those ideas of audio and visual together.
You mentioned a few words. You said experimenting was like one word you talked about. Frenetic was the way you described your art. Would you say those two words are related to your process, or how would you say your process is for when you're creating?
Yeah, so I went to school to be a designer. So in school and as a designer, and I think we're going to talk more about the MAEA logo a little bit later too, but that process of making something that's a bit more traditional graphic design is much different than something that I might be working with as a conceptual piece, like some of my audio visual stuff that I'm doing. So I would say if I had to choose like a process that I usually go with, it's just a lot of writing things down. And growing up now, I'm realizing that the process is like more than half of the art making battle of like getting in there and really choosing to do something. So I spend a lot of time thinking and rethinking what I'm going to do before I really get in and start making it. As an adult, I don't have like a crazy amount of time, especially as a teacher. That's my job. So I'm constantly teaching and coming up with curriculum and working with students. So the time that I do have during the day to make the art, I really want to make sure that I'm focusing on the stuff that I really want to make and that I'm excited about. So that process really looks like a lot of scribbling and a lot of thinking and talking it through, and the cyclical process of just trying a little bit of something and seeing if it sticks and then working through it.
You designed the image for the Massachusetts Art Education Conference this past fall. And that definitely falls into the design category, which is what you went to school for, which may be a little bit different than if you were making something not for a client per se. So, what was the process like for you in designing that image?
It was such a cool experience. I was so happy that I was able to do it. I To be honest, this was at the end of the school year, last school year, so this was like maybe May or July or June when I got the, thing in the mail that said call to action. We need people to design something, take a look and see if you'd like to. So I received that, and then I was just kind of messing around and I was thinking about it, and I sent something in and then I kind of forgot about it for a couple of weeks. And I didn't hear anything back for a little while, so I was like, no harm, no foul. I it's all good, whatever. I tried, and then I got in the in my email a thing that said like, you got it. You If you want to do it, we'd love to have you. And from there, it was just, yeah, it was a really cool experience to work with the people over at MAEA, and you guys were amazing, and you were super supportive with whatever I wanted to do, which is a really cool feeling as a designer. Usually, especially with freelance design, you're working with people and you're kind of making what they really want you and need you to make. So having the latitude to kind of explore and make some really interesting, stuff was such a cool experience. And seeing all that stuff out at the Worcester Art Museum was such an amazing experience for me. It was really cool.
Yeah, so as a designer, I would think that it is uniquely challenging to develop your own style. How do you go about developing your own style while also balancing that with being a designer and working for clients?
Yeah, I it's always strange because as a teacher, a lot of students will like generally ask you like, how do you come up with a style? Or
Mhm.
I like this specific style, so how do I replicate it, or how do I make it look the way that I want to? And I think I'd push back a little bit and say I don't know if style is something that you necessarily can just create and that's what you have is your own perfect little style, because that's not how art works. I mean, art is in the moment, art is something that takes thought and planning, but is also kind of sporadic. So when people are talking about making a style or having a distinct style, I think it's about letting the style kind of cornily enough, choose you. I kind of like to use the Harry Potter analogy of like the wand chooses the wizard. It's the style kind of chooses the artist. You have to make things in order to find that style. So, yeah, over time and working with design and then all of my more conceptual stuff, that style kind of just seeps out and becomes a thing over time.
Like style is definitely something that coming out of art school, especially, everybody's kind of presented with that. You need your own unique style. You need to have a style. It's basically your brand as an artist and what people will identify you as. So, as much as possible, what do you think people would say if they were going to use 3 words and only 3 words to describe your art that you produce? What do you think they would say?
Oh man, three's hard. Three's a hard number to hit for this. I feel like, I mean, if someone had to look at my work and use 3 words, I'd probably say something like digital, conceptual, and I would hope something like vibrant or colorful. I like to think of my work as like I grew up watching Disney Pixar films, so my work kind of embodies that like whimsical kind of youth of Disney Pixar and stuff. So I would hope they would use those words.
That's definitely a high bar to aspire to
Just a
Disney
little.
Pixar,
Just a little.
but
Yeah.
got to
I,
set the
I
bar high.
yeah, I shoot high, shoot way too high.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say that your logo, yeah, I could call that design that you did for MAEA, those three words would check the boxes.
Thank you. Thank
Absolutely.
you very much.
Absolutely. So what is something that you're still learning to master or that you would like to learn to master? Because like I find it very difficult to settle on like one material. I get bored and then I start wanting to learn other things. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's the same with you. Like, what do you want to master?
Yeah, I don't think I have ADHD, but I have like art ADHD. I think like every day is a new. If I watch a YouTube video and it's something that looks really cool, that's the thing that I'm working on next. Like that's just how
Mhm.
my brain works. So when I'm thinking of like mastery or like what mastery means to me, I wouldn't say that I'm really a master of anything. So I think the cool part about art is that you're in it for the long haul. Like you're kind of always trying to make something maybe not better, but more interesting, more creative, kind of one upping yourself the last thing that you made. So when I'm looking at my art and what I want to do, I think I just want to continue to work with the audio and visual and like marrying the idea of like digital media and maybe some like animation. Again, kind of going back to that idea of Disney Pixar and
Mhm.
trying to get those things to kind of meld together in a way that makes things more interesting for me. So I don't think I'm a master of anything, but if I wanted to become better at something, it'd probably be the idea of taking some of that content that I'm already making and just make it more kinetic, more enjoyable for a viewer on a screen or in person at a museum, is
Mhm.
just make that audience interaction more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's definitely for art teachers especially because we teach so many media that we experiment with a lot of media.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
digital is still a very young field, so there's a lot of growth still in the digital field and
Yeah.
virtual reality and things like that that can be brought into it. So there's huge amount of things to still master
Digital,
down that road.
yeah, digital media is
Mhm.
broad field that I don't think anyone has truly 100% understood yet, and I think it's still growing. That's a huge aspect of my work is like technology and the growth of technology. That's what I did like my master's thesis on was like adolescence in
Mhm.
technology. So I am super into the idea of like a medium that is just going to continue to grow for as long as I'm around, maybe more. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to happen. The media, digital is going to outgrow both of us. We'll be
Yeah,
on. Digital
that'd
is
be
here.
yeah.
So, what advice do you wish somebody had given you early on in the road about pursuing a career in the art field?
So I think one piece of advice that I received like way later on in my career. So I'm 29 now. So probably when I was like 24 or 25, someone just told me, just make cool stuff. They just
Mhm.
said, just make cool stuff. There was no context to it. We were working on something and I was talking to them and they just said, just make cool stuff. That's all you have to do as an artist is just make cool stuff. So growing up, I think if I had to give myself advice, looking back, it would be just to make cool stuff and continue to make cool stuff because that's how you learn.
Would that be the same advice you would give to someone now, or would you give them more, less, different advice?
That's a really good question. Um, I think if I had to give someone advice now, like some of my students or people who are maybe looking to get into the field of art or digital media or whatever you want to call it, I think it would be make cool stuff, but also just enjoy the process of making the cool stuff. It's not all about making a thing and then having it be shown at a museum or at the Worcester Art Museum, wherever. Like it's just about the process of making something and looking at the journey that you took to get to an end goal and learning from that, but also just like appreciating that it takes a journey to get somewhere. I think that's a really cool thing about art is that it's never just from point A to point B. There's a lot of stuff in the middle that is probably the most important part, I think.
That sounds like great advice. I think looking at art as a journey is terrific because there's bumps on the road
Sure.
and there's forks in the road. So you have to like make those decisions as an artist and as a creative person. So definitely great advice. Is there any place that you'd like people to look for your work? Any social media handles you'd like to share out?
Yeah, I mean, my Instagram is where I keep a lot of my like links to other projects that I'm working on. So that's Barros, which is my last name, Barros, dot period exe, like an application file. So barros.exe on Instagram. That's where I have my link tree. That's where all of my other social media kind of stems to as well. So barros.exe on Instagram.
Excellent. And we'll drop that in the video description as well so that
Thank you very much.
into it. Excellent. All right. So thank you so much for this interview today.
Awesome.
I hope it was enjoyable for you.
It was awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.